Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving straight into something pretty big happening, or potentially happening, in South Africa. The arrival of Starlink.
That's Elon Musk's satellite internet service, yeah. And its possible entry is stirring up quite a bit of debate.
Absolutely. What seems to be at the core of it, really, is this tension. You've got this promise, this potential for much better internet, especially for people who don't have great options now.
Right, the underserved areas.
Exactly. But that's bumping right up against, well, some significant regulatory hurdles and, real concerns from the local telecom players.
Yeah, the established companies.
Precisely.
Right.
And to try and get a handle on all of this, we've been digging into quite a few articles and reports looking at Starlink's situation there.
So the mission for this deep dive.
Basically, yeah, our mission is to unpack the key issues, understand the arguments flying back and forth, and figure out what it all could mean for you, the listener, in terms of digital access and maybe the wider economy, too.
Okay, so let's tackle that biggest roadblock first, the regulatory one.
Sounds good. South Africa's broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Laws, B-BBEE. They require foreign telecom companies to have 30% ownership by historically disadvantaged groups. That's the sticking point for Starlink, isn't it? That's exactly it. Starlink seems, unwilling or perhaps unable to meet that specific direct ownership requirement.
Right.
But this is where it gets really interesting. There's a proposal now for something called an equity equivalent policy, a potential way around this.
An equity equivalent. Okay, so what would that actually look like on the ground? Does it mean direct ownership is off the table?
It seems so. Instead of giving away equity, Starlink might be able to, say, invest in other things that still aim for economic empowerment.
Like what kind of things?
Well, it could be funding skills training, maybe putting money into building infrastructure in rural areas, or perhaps investing in Black-owned small or medium businesses, things like that.
Okay, so the argument of this approach...
The argument for it is basically trying to find a balance, meet the transformation goals, but also attract the foreign investment and the tech that Starlink brings.
A balance. But I imagine there's pushback.
Oh, definitely. There's criticism.
Yeah, because how effective are those equivalent investments compared to actual ownership in, really empowering people long term? That's got to be the question.
You've hit it right there. Figures like Julius Malema from the EFF, they've been very vocal. They argue this equity equivalent idea basically weakens B-BBEE.
So their view is it's kind of letting Starlink off the hook.
Essentially, yeah. The report suggests their view is it prioritizes Musk over genuine empowerment for those groups the policy was meant to help.
And then there's the politics around it too, right? The timing.
Right. Minister Solly Malatsi has denied that the government is specifically doing this for Starlink. But the policy announcement came not long after President Ramaphosa met with Donald Trump, who apparently lobbied for Starlink. So that timing has definitely raised eyebrows and fueled some suspicion about, external pressures.
Okay, yeah, that adds another layer. Let's shift gears a bit. What about the impact on the actual telecom industry in South Africa?
Good question. Because the potential benefits, on paper at least, look quite strong.
The speeds.
Yeah, speeds. Ookla reports suggest median downloads in Africa for Starlink are somewhere between, say, 40 and 75 milli-Ts. That's a big jump for many people.
A huge jump, potentially. And if you think about the reach, satellite can go places fiber struggles to. We're talking about, maybe 22 million South Africans who currently have poor or no fixed broadband?
Exactly. Often relying on maybe slower mobile data. So this could be huge for connectivity.
Plus, Starlink keeps innovating. Things like direct-to-cell technology that could really shake up the mobile operator's hold on some rural markets.
Yeah, you can see why the existing companies might be a bit nervous.
Understandably. Vodacom, for instance, their public stance is more like, satellite can complement our 4G and 5G.
Sort of. It's an addition, not a replacement.
Kind of, yeah. But behind the scenes, you also see lobbying. MTN, Telkom, industry groups like ACT, they seem to be pushing for delays.
On what grounds?
They talk about needing regulatory fairness, making sure everyone plays by the same rules, and wanting detailed impact studies done first, before Starlink gets the green light.
So it really looks like a clash. Rural users could potentially win big with better access.
Definitely potential winners there.
But the incumbent providers,
Right.
they're clearly worried about disruption to their businesses.
Precisely. And we should probably look beyond just the connection speeds too, right? What about the broader economic and social side of things?
Yeah, like digital inclusion. If you suddenly get reliable broadband into rural schools or farms or small businesses.
The potential is massive. Things like e-learning finally becoming practical, or farmers using agri-tech more effectively.
Imagine that. Real opportunities for growth in places that have been left behind digitally. But, and this is a big but,
The cost.
the cost, yeah. The hardware, the monthly fee. Reports put around $1,500 a month. That's still pretty steep for many, many households.
Yeah, that's a significant barrier. So it raises that question about equity again. It's a technological solution, maybe, but is it an accessible solution for everyone?
Not automatically, it seems. Maybe this is where the equity equivalent idea could circle back.
How so?
Well, perhaps those investment programs could fund things like tech hubs in communities, or maybe subsidize access for low-income rural users.
That's a possibility, I suppose. It could theoretically help bridge that affordability gap.
But, like we said before, there's still that skepticism from critics about how accountable those programs would be compared to just giving people actual ownership stakes.
True. That debate isn't going away, and we can't ignore the sort of geopolitical noise around this either.
You mean Musk's comments?
Yeah, Musk's rather blunt "I'm not black" comment, and those reports about Trump allegedly pushing for Starlink. It's turned it into something more than just a business or regulatory issue.
It really has. It seems to have become a bit of a diplomatic football between the U.S. and South Africa, almost.
Yeah, adding complexity we probably didn't need. So looking forward then, where does this leave things? What's the path ahead?
Well, it's still pretty uncertain, honestly, that draft equity equivalent policy. It's open for public comment until June 2025.
Wow, 2025. So this isn't happening overnight.
Not at all. It shows there's still a long road ahead. And given how strong the opinions are on both sides, you've got to think legal challenges down the line are pretty likely.
Makes sense. And technically, Starlink is still evolving too, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. We're seeing reports, like in Kenya, where they've apparently got latency down to around 60 milliseconds.
Which is much better for satellite. How they manage that?
Apparently, by using local points of presence, these NAP-Africa Internet Exchange points, it shortens the distance the data has to travel.
Okay, so that suggests similar improvements could be possible in South Africa if they get the go-ahead and set up the right infrastructure. Latency used to be satellite's big weakness.
Exactly. It shows the tech is getting better fast. But, even with better tech, how Starlink actually enters the market could be key.
What do you mean?
Well, they might choose to focus initially on, say, urban areas or more affluent customers who can definitely afford the $1,500 a month.
Leaving the rural areas, the ones who need it most, still waiting.
Potentially, yeah. Unless there's some government push or specific partnership to ensure that doesn't happen.
Right. So stepping back from all the details,
Yeah.
the big questions seem to be, is Starlink going to be this amazing connectivity revolution for South Africa, really bridging that digital divide?
Or could it end up making inequalities worse if only wealthier people can afford it?
It really feels like policymakers are walking a tightrope here.
Totally. How do you grab the benefits of this powerful satellite tech for wider access, especially for those who need it?
Without undermining those crucial economic empowerment goals, and without being seen as unfair to the local companies who've invested heavily already.
It's a massive balancing act. And with all the international eyes on this now, the decisions South Africa makes could echo elsewhere too.
Definitely. So maybe the thought to leave with you, the listener, is what does a truly fair digital future for South Africa actually look like? And what's the right mix of technologies and policies to get us there?
Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.